What comes first, branding or traction? People need to know that you exist to get traction. Yet, how can you get traction if you don't have the budget or know how to let people know that you exist? What if there was the simplest way to tell your stories, to connect the heart and not just the mind, so that you can grow your startup and attract investors? You're in luck because today on this episode, I'm bringing to you Danny Matthews, who is the king of storytelling and just finding out a way to grow and really help you to get your startup to where you need to go. Danny Matthews is the founder of Short Story Ventures, who build brands by investing creativity capital and connections to turn entrepreneurs into game-changing brands. His career took a turning point when a proof of concept deal secured $3.5 billion in funding. Since then, he has invested in 4 companies, advised 2 startups, and helped around 100 startups get traction and funding using a brand-first methodology. Now, what is even funnier is that in addition to all of that, Danny finds the time to be an amazing founder and director of the Founder Institute London chapter. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Nailima Kang from Athena Leaders. As a startup advisor and consultant, I will answer live the burning question that you have on your journey to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Danny, welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startup live show.
Thank you, Naili. What a great introduction. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you. Well, funny enough, as I was speaking to you earlier, we did talk about what happens if there are any issues with the podcast. And now I'm experiencing some issues. Can you speak to me again, Danny?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. We were saying, like, if anything happens, you lose connection. You just have to, frame it as a commercial break or something. I don't know. Yeah,
exactly.
Give people a chance to go for a toilet break.
Yes, and what is even funnier is that we rehearsed the live just before going live, and then for some reason my headphone decided to go on a break. So now we're back. So First question, now that we are really back here, of course I've spent so much time researching online, and there's so many things to unpack, and I'm really curious about Short Story Ventures, but also everything else that you did before, because one thing I love about your experience is that you are a non-standard founder, entrepreneur. You just jump into stuff and then you just make them happen. But in your journey, especially with what you do now, you spend a lot of time listening to people and startup pitch either directly to you for funding or work with your team, or as part of Founder Institute and all of the other programs you're part of. What annoys you the most when you hear a pitch?
Most of the time, it's all based on logic. I get that there is a lot of logic involved with starting a business. You have to get the numbers work and all those kinds of things. But the thing that I guess really annoys me is that most founders find it really hard to communicate why what they're doing is important, or why what they're doing is really meant to be out there in the world. There's so many ideas that I think people have that I was having a bit of a joke with someone on LinkedIn this morning that they were talking about what the process should be. And I kind of joked and said, I thought the process was come up with an idea, ask your mum if it's any good, go and not get funding or whatever, and then put exited founder on your LinkedIn profile, and that's it, job done. You're a success. So yeah, I think the thing that annoys me most probably is that there's way too much logic involved with pitching, and not enough emotion, not enough storytelling, and not enough real compelling reasons to buy the product, I guess.
And we definitely need to dive deep into that. Just because I come from a background as a software engineer, and for me, I am on the side of logic. Yet when I started my business, I think the hardest part was to leave logic behind. Why cannot describe what I do based on exactly what I do rather than using terms that get into the heart? But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about short story ventures?
Yeah, short story ventures was born out of me wanting to bring together all these things that I had done over the years, whether it was joint ventures with companies or just branding projects, and a bunch of other stuff. And I just thought, I used to run the company as an agency model and just felt like I was a bit trapped by it and that it wasn't really fulfilling its purpose. So I decided to change the business from an agency to what Short Story Ventures is now, which I call a venture studio. So we're really focused on helping early stage startups get traction and funding through really traditional branding methods, I guess you could call them, but in a unique way. And that's really the focus of Short Story Ventures at the moment.
And how do you define traditional branding methods?
Yeah, so traditional, I think we all hear branding things, in passing, in conversation. So traditional branding methods, I guess you could refer to as things like mission and vision statements or values or messaging, and design as well. There is a visual element of it. I think most people refer to branding as a visual identity, so your logos and colors and things like that. Over the years, I've come to realize that branding itself probably needs a rebrand, because we've come away since prodding cows with hot iron rods, and we've been through an industrial age and a digital age, and now there's a whole other world out there through the metaverse and cryptocurrency and all the rest of it, and Web3. So I think over the years, the way that we describe branding is, or define what it is, has changed. And the confusion, I think, comes from how broad it is. So I have a strong belief that branding is the foundation of any business, and it should be done not as a one-off exercise, but as a continuous living thing in the business. So it should be constantly looked at alongside your product, for example, and embedded in the business as a organ that you are refining constantly. But I think many people treat it as a more of a impromptu exercise when they feel it necessary, or when the idea of a new logo takes their fancy.
And I see that a lot, and you're absolutely right, because and even myself, as I've mentioned before, I come from a technical background, so anything else, and my vision, even from the outside of what branding was, is that thing that you do because you need a logo and you need to have the right colors for your website. And then when you do that, you realize that your business doesn't stand still. It always evolves, it adapts, whether it's through a pivot or whether it is through just natural growth, but you're still stuck with the same brand identity, the same messaging, the same way of trying to connect to user that feels a little bit clunky because you are a year or even less than that, actually, especially in the startup world.
Yeah, it's been for most designers, which I guess in the beginning is what I was, the whole concept of branding is like a frustration point for them, because almost every person you speak to asks for a logo, but no one can give you the information you need to do a really good job of a brand or a logo or whatever it might be. Now I realize that branding is way more than just a visual element. It's way more than even messaging or strategy or mission and all those things. And I've realized over time that I have a real keen interest in neuroscience and psychology around branding and marketing. So over the years, I've realized that branding is really just a bridge between our experience of life and why we buy things. We all have a link to something in our life that has changed the way we do things, or changed what we buy, or why we buy things. So branding is really just understanding those people and their lives and how that influences that you're trying to sell, and trying to link the two together through things like stories and messaging and visual identities.
Now, if I'm a founder and assuming that this was my first gig and I'm still at the Nailis 1.0 when I first started, and I have zero idea where to start and it's a bit overwhelming, what would you suggest I look into if I want to kind of up my game from a branding perspective?
So most founders, I think, have a good idea of what they want to do. It's, whether that's through the products that they're building or whether it's through a problem that they're solving. They usually have an idea of what they're doing or what they want to do. What they really struggle with is how to communicate that to people so that they care, or care as much as they do sometimes. So someone just starting out that's never done this before, what usually happens is the founder will say, branding's really important, but I'm going to wait until we get funding, till I really spend any money on it or reinvest in it. And I think they miss a massive opportunity to be able to capture people early. Branding's the most powerful when it's at the very early stages, when you're conducting customer interviews or when you're trying to decide how you communicate what your vision is to the outside world. So the ways that you can link this together, I guess, with the start journey process is that the moment you come up with an idea, a problem that needs solving, you already have a vision. You've already thought about, you might not have written it down, but you've already thought about what the problem is and the big problem you want to solve. That really is just a vision. And most people over convolute these kinds of things, but that's your vision really. And you have to find out a way to communicate that in a really compelling way. And then when you get to something like product market fit, for example, and you're doing customer interview, and you're trying to find out if there's a market for something, and you land on a solution, your solution really is your mission. It's the way that you move towards vision. So right from the very, very outset of coming up with an idea for a business, you start doing branding. The problem is that most people don't do it intentionally and they lose opportunity along the way. So I have a philosophy is every person, place, and product has a brand already. So it's a default. Everyone has it. Everything has it. Even places have it. But when you become aware of it, you have to be intentional about taking control of it. So, and what I mean by that, being intentional about taking control of it, is that you have to start thinking about what you believe in and how you communicate that and all those things. Else you fall into the trap of other people building a perception around you and you're losing control of it, which is really what branding is. It's just the control of perception of what other people perceive you to be as a brand or a person or a place or a product.
And most of the time we are not aware of that perception of how do people perceive us, because we are in our heads, we kind of know what we've been working on for a long time. And even when we look at personal branding, as you said, every person or place also have a brand. We are not aware either of how we perceived. One of the things I like to do, especially when I start working with a startup, I try not to speak to them for a long time to understand the entire background, and first go online and on social media and try to find out about them. And actually I do that for my podcast guests as well, because sometimes what you see online and the way I interpret that, especially when it comes to a business, can be different than what the business think that they are doing or think that their target market should be. So for example, if you are going for large, big corporates, the tone of voice could be different and if it was a direct to customers in some ways as well. Yet many people don't think about even those tiny basic aspects of why it's important to look after, understand yourself really, and understand how you communicate with others.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's I'm constantly trying to explain to people that you have to really understand what people want. And that sounds really simple, but most people most people think they understand like the problem they're solving, but that's different to understanding what people want. People might want like a broader outcome, and you might solve a specific problem. And if you're communicating about a specific problem and the problem is broad, actually they're completely separate. So when you're thinking about communicating, whether it's through marketing or whatever, messaging or whatever it might be, what people want, or often referred to as what people think they want, is often not what you believe they need. If that makes sense. They're very, very
Yes.
different things. So understanding the difference between those and the relation between the two is important as well.
And one way of doing that, one way that I've seen you advocate quite a few times, not just at Founder Institute, but as well through the work that you do, is storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit why you think that storytelling is like one of the secret sauce that is missing in a lot of ways that we communicate with others, whether it's through pitching, even if it's not investors pitching, just pitching about what you're doing, and websites and the likes?
Most founders, I think, when they get to pitching stage, as an example, they have a really good product. They are hitting the market at the right time. They're the right people or the right team to execute on the idea, but lose the customer or the investor the second that they open their mouth. And the reason for that is that they are telling a story of themselves instead of telling a story that invites the other person in to the story. So there's a very, very thin line between telling a story about your product or you and telling a story that invites other people in. Sometimes through a nuance of language, sometimes just through how it's positioned, or even just the order you say things in. So it's I think the reason that this is such a underutilized thing is because the nuances are so tiny, but they make a massive, massive difference to your chances of getting customers or traction or funding from investors. And I think it's a opportunity that almost every startup is missing out on.
I really love what you said about most startups lose the opportunity of getting through the doors just in the moment that they open their mouth. And that is,
Yeah,
it's so true.
true.
I mean, I've seen slide decks, or I've went to, because I speak at some of the startup conferences, especially in Madrid. And I get there, I have to introduce a startup. And because I MC, I tend to do research beforehand. But you can really see that, especially on the pitch competition stage, where I've done my research. I feel, oh, this is really exciting. I really can't wait to meet the person. And I get on stage and feel, really? I mean, what is the disconnection here between the two? I can see the passion and everything, but it's just there's no connection. I would actually prefer to have stayed with what I saw online rather than what I'm hearing.
And it's we see this in Founder Institute as well. We see pitch after pitch after pitch, 15 weeks on end from founders, and the ones who pick up the power of storytelling and really building that narrative into a pitch in the right way see the difference. And we can see it as directors, because we have mentors and investors in the rooms when we're doing these pitches. And if you listen closely, the ones who really get storytelling and they implement it into their pitch and their structure, the feedback is so different. You will start to notice that people pick up specifically on that, and they'll say, I really liked your storytelling at the start, and so they pick up on that specifically. And me and a colleague, a network friend of mine, did a little bit of research with investors, and we asked them what is missing from most of the pitches that you see. And most of them will just say the narrative. I just wasn't bought into the narrative that they were telling. And most of the time, it's not because of the product or service. It's not because of what they were trying to sell. It's because of how they were talking about it. That was all. So it's purely in the nuance of communication of storytelling that I think people get wrong. Most people think, well, whenever I see brand storytelling mentioned, most founders assume that that is their origin story, and that ruins their chances immediately, because the brand story that you should be telling invites other people in as the hero of the story. It doesn't make you or your team or the product the hero of the story. And I think one of the biggest nuances in storytelling.
Can you unpack that a little bit, especially for those who might not be aware of what an origin story is versus the hero's
Mm-hmm.
analogy?
Yeah, great. So whenever someone says, so a really good example, right? And this is the nuance of language. So someone says to you, so what's your story? We're immediately compelled to say, well, I grew up in this area and, started this business because of X, Y, Z. And you talk about yourself a lot, because essentially that's what they're asking you. They're asking you to tell your story. What they're actually asking you is, what problem are you solving, or what's the thing you're working on? Why does that matter? So the origin story is really your personal founder story. That is, I came up with this idea. This is I came with the idea, and it's still a story. You can still tell it, but it's not what gets people to buy or invest in you. The difference between an origin story and a hero's journey is that the hero's journey, you talk about the customer, the investor, instead of talking about you. So whereas your origin story is very much how the idea came about and your background and why you've got this team, why you're running this business. The hero's journey, or the hero's story, is where you talk about the problem exists and how the world would be if it was solved, or how the person would be if the problem was solved, and those kinds of things. You're really looking at problem, solution, different worlds, really, different worlds apart.
Yeah, and in fact, that I think one of the reasons why there is this confusion is that when you look at the pitch formula, let's take the pitch formula for an example. One of the things that people hear a lot is that they need to convey their passion for what they are working on, the passion for their startups, the passion for the problems. And most of the time, that translates to the origin story of what happens to me. And I'm trying to share my passion by telling you what happens to me. So how can you make
Yeah.
those twists to say that differently? I don't know if you kind of get my drift on that.
Yeah, interesting. So you might get some feedback that says, I need you to show your passion, and most people take that, okay, I love this problem and this business, and I created this business, and I'm very passionate about solving the problem. And that's a really normal thing to do, and quite a natural thing to do, is to move into that space of like, I need to show how passionate I am about this idea. But again, it's not the communication that other people want to hear. It's not compelling enough. It's funny how many founders are adamant from the very beginning that they have this great idea and it's going to be the next big thing or whatever. And I ask them to tell me why they started the business, and they tell me how passionate they are about the problem and why they want it to solve. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean that anyone else cares. And I think that's an important point that probably gets missed in the process of caring so much about why you are the person to do this, or why you should be running the business, or taking this idea to market, or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's very much it's as much as a mindset shift as it is a communication thing. You do kind of have to put yourself on the sidelines for a moment and think about things in a very, very different way. But me saying this, I don't blame anyone for communicating in that way, because most of the time it's pulled out of us by people asking the questions. Like I mentioned ago, and says, "Tell me your story." of course you're just going to reel off a bunch of stuff about yourself because that's what they asked for. But that's not what you should respond with if you want a result like getting investment or getting customers through the door.
Yeah, it's all about practice and making sure that when those questions comes in, regardless of what it is, and the context being whether it's a networking situation or the likes, then be ready to kind of connect so that the first thing that comes through your mouth doesn't lose the opportunity that you could have had with that person. And I also like and really want to emphasize what you've mentioned about the mindset shift, because I think that's something that I personally had to go through to really understand the hero, or even how do you, in any piece of content, especially in social media and the likes, how do you make sure that the light shines on the person that you want to work with, which is your target market, because they're the one reading that and they need to see themselves. Now, funnily enough, it happens to us naturally every day. Why did you stop at this particular post but not at the other one as you're scrolling through your feed? Yet we don't really pick up that about ourselves. And I've been doing some testing recently where when I stop at the post, I ask myself, why? And just doing that has helped me to see nuances in writing from other people. It could be someone I don't even know. Hooks, and how do they use those kind of hooks, or the first line and what kind of content, the way they lay out their contents, which is something I'm actually testing now, laying out my content differently. All of those subtle things goes back to what you mentioned about the broader topic of communication, and falls into your branding and your own growth. Is not something that's static. It's something that always evolves and continues.
Yeah, so the visual aspect of like layout and things that you mentioned is very interesting, because a lot of the stuff that we're taught, or a lot of the stuff that is usually quite logical to us when we're creating images or social media images, for example, is pretty logical, but all of the right stuff to do is not at all. So, for example, there's a lot of like psychology, I guess, in this. But for example, if you have, what most people do is they create a social media post and they put the information on the social media image, and they fill it with way too much text and use an image in the background, and it's covered with text and you can't really see anything. There's some swirly, like, fancy writing that no one can read. And really, the way that social media posts work and the scroll works is that the only thing that you need to do with a social media image is to get someone's attention and stop them from scrolling. So, like you were saying, really paying attention to what stopped you scrolling and why, and what the structure of that message was, or text. It is a nuance I think most people don't get the chance to really dig into. And a couple of things that you can consider, or maybe use in your next post, for example, for something a little bit actionable here, is remove any logos from the images you use on social media. It's really funny. Our brains have been trained to see sales messages on social media. So even if it's a very innocent post, if you put your logo on the image, people's brains are triggered by a sales message, and they immediately think, oh, it's a sales thing, so I'll scroll past. Whereas if you take your logo off, the less it looks like a sales post, the better, right? Because we're kind of put off by that kind of thing. And reading patterns, we very often read in a zigzag because of how we read books, for example, one sentence, and then we kind of go like a typewriter. Our eyes go back to the beginning, and then we go again and we reset. So it kind of zigzag patterns really work for text layouts, for example. So I think so that's just a few very small things that you could keep in mind when you're creating maybe images or social media posts in the future, and that the image is really it's really to pique curiosity or to get someone to stop scrolling. Your only job with a social media image is to stop people enough, or get someone's attention enough, and make them curious enough that they look for context around the image, whether that's your profile, whether that's the text, whether that's hashtag topics, whether that's just to look at how many likes it's got because they wonder if it's popular or not, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of little little psychological nuances that go into not just the messaging or the branding or whatever, but just creating an image or a social media post.
Gosh, you just confirmed what I always tell people. I don't know why programming got such a bad rap, but programming is so much easier than marketing. I'm sorry, right? You might say I'm biased, but I would even go back to the 1960s when I used to program, where you used to program with tapes and all those weird machines and paper and stuff. I would still pick programming despite that pain to marketing. I just had one of the biggest haha moments I've ever had in a podcast, and I was about to start laughing earlier. I put logos on every single pictures that I put out because that's what you meant to do.
Yeah, because it's a natural thing. It's like, how are people supposed to know it's you? But the whole point of storytelling is that it's not about you. Like
Yes.
that's the whole point of it. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to be communicating from their point of view. So yeah, it's funny. It's funny how storytelling goes beyond just the words that you use and the structure of a message, if you like. It goes beyond that. Even the visual aspects is storytelling. That design is visual storytelling. So I'm quite fortunate actually that I didn't, when I entered the design and branding world, I didn't have any qualifications or experience in the commercial world of creating things, designing things, doing branding. I really did learn from people and practice. Really, there was I have a piece of paper that says that I'm a designer or a branding person, but I do have, years worth of clients of testing and learn about how people use social media and how people scroll and the psychology of color and semiotics and shapes and symbols and things like that. So I learned from people and practice, and I think that was the best learning I could have done, because even though a lot of the design I do now is very specific, I'm in a very fortunate position that I pick and choose. I'm fortunate to have a design background as well as a business background, and that has done me pretty well over the years.
And actually, it's really exciting to see the diversity and variety in your skill set and hear about your journey, because a lot of people believe that unless you've had the background in marketing, sales, the whole area of business development or growing businesses is complete, abstract and cannot be learned. As you said, you've pretty much self-taught in that world, and you've been doing it extremely well. So that's definitely an encouragement. Now, I think there's one thing I'd love for us to touch on, because I think one of the offers that you have for startups is really exciting. But before we go on to that, then let's go in and do a bit of short storytelling to discover who Danny Matthews is. Well, we will do that through a series of questions that are kind of a quick fire round of questions. Now, I'm trying to talk, but I'm still super excited because in my brain, I've got like a to-do list. Tell the team to remove logos from the post. Right, to-do list done. If you guys are listening when you're editing these videos, please just take that as an action. This is efficiency to the goal. Right, now I can focus. Quick fire questions. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, good question. I think it changes throughout life. I was definitely an early bird before kids. Now it's definitely night owl, because the kids get up early and I don't get to get up super early and to have time to myself. So yeah, I take whatever I can get, to be honest. So, but I think naturally I'm an early bird. I think I'm an early bird naturally.
Oh.
Apparently it's hereditary. So my family's early birds as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm also an early bird. I'm more than happy to work at 5 o'clock than to work at 2 p.m. And then maybe I could do the evening session as well. But yes, earlier the better. So, what are 3 of your favorite tools?
Ooh, 3 of my favorite tools. Digital tools?
Well,
Okay,
I
so
can't answer
I
that.
would. Okay. So I'm going to go with manual paper and pen journaling is
Oh.
one. I don't think I could live without Adobe Illustrator, and probably let's do Figma as a third.
Okay, great. Interesting on the manual paper. Why paper for journaling? Have you tried digital journaling before?
Yeah, I've tried everything. I've tried iPad and pencil, so digital
Mhm.
writing. So you're still writing as if it's paper, but it's digital. I've tried manual pencil and paper. I've tried typing on a keyboard. I've tried typing on my phone. Um, there's a lot of science behind manual writing on
Mm.
paper, funnily enough. So even the iPad and pencil doesn't work as well as manual pen and paper. Something to do with the time of day that you journal as well. There's some science behind. So I've just found a way that works for me. Actually considered bringing out a product at one stage because I learned some amazing science about brainwave states and when the best, which is the best state to journal in. How to do it in the evening and in the morning, and how to filter, how to solve problems and think creatively during the day. So yeah, it's just become a really good tool for me to be able to organize my brain, if you like, and make the most of my creativity without being distracted or without random thoughts popping into my head.
It's quite exciting. And again, for any founders, I believe that have their brain swirling at 1,000 miles an hour, then you might also want to try journaling because I think it's a tool that I also swear by. And just like you, I've tried various things, but the only time where I swear by paper and pen is when I journal. To-do list and everything is
Mm.
pretty much digital. The only reason I've got a
Yeah.
pen in my house is to journal. So next
Yeah,
question.
definitely. Yeah.
So one mistake you've made that other founders should watch out for?
Chasing money. And that sounds really
Okay.
weird to like founders who want to go for funding. Um, I think if it was possible, and it's not possible in every sector or every idea or every vision that people have, but if I had to choose, everyone would bootstrap. I think you are much better off in the long run um, bootstrapping and proving a concept and getting funding later. But it's the difference between it's funny. Most founders' issue is like chicken egg, right? So it's I need traction to get the funding, but I need funding to get the traction, and if you break that cycle, actually you'll learn quite a lot, and you'll learn that you don't have to have funding to get traction, but you do need traction to get funding. So if you can bootstrap something that validates a concept, that allows you to build a waiting list or a pre-order list or whatever it is, it makes you more attractive. Now, if you do that for even longer, then you get to call the shots. You get to give less equity away. You get like you build up you build leverage basically. It's the same, and it's the exact same scenario as the founders that think because they want to build a tech product, they have to get a CTO, a co-founder, a technical
Mhm.
co-founder, and it's crazy because they give away half of their company or whatever from the get-go before they've even done anything. Whereas if they could hold off and learn something, build a proof of concept or an MVP themselves, and build some traction that way, you have more bargaining power with a CTO or a technical co-founder than you would without it. So yeah, I think that's my opinion on founders, I guess, but also generally in life, my journey through chasing the money, I guess, was met with a met with a real downside. Um, so so yeah, it's that would be the biggest thing, I think.
We definitely need to come back on your story of chasing the money, as that's I'm sure anyone listening to that wants to know where the chess got to. But to finish off with the quick fire question round first, the last question is, what is the best day of your professional life?
Oh my god. Yeah. So actually, I can pinpoint one. So a few years ago, I went through a process of trying to become greener, trying better for the environment, and I reached the point where the company was net zero, and I worked with an amazing lady who helped me do that. And I joined a charity, or as a member, I joined a charity called the Good Business Charter, started by an amazing entrepreneur called Julian Richer. If anyone's an audio geek, then he was the guy who founded Richer Sounds over 40 years ago. And he runs a number of charities, and one of those is the Good Business Charter. And the Good Business Charter have 10 components of responsible business. So you basically sign up and become a member, you have to abide by these things. So it's things like paying a fair wage, so paying a living wage rather than just a minimum wage. And also paying invoices on time, paying fair tax, and things like that. It really is just a way for people to do business more responsibly. And Julian has this whole thesis around ethical capitalism. So I was a big fan of that, and I joined as a member a few years ago. And then I was approached by them to help them with their rebrand, and that was a pretty big highlight, actually, to be not only I guess a fan or really look up to them in terms of their work, but to be the one person requested to go and help them with their rebrand. I'm talking like, I even asked them straight, and I said, you know, out of everyone, why me? And she said, well, oh, we do our back checks on everyone, and we know you're the right person to do this. And that for me was a pretty big highlight.
Wow, that's an impressive story. And definitely the effort of being ethical in business is quite hard. I mean, especially for those who haven't run a business before. Just something as simple as paying invoices on time. It's something that I also believe strongly in terms of working really well, have a good relationship, and that includes my commitment to paying my team, whether they are full time or not.
Yeah.
Yet, as you can tell, I'm sure we can sit here and talk a lot about invoices, headaches that we've had. But more importantly, congratulations on actually reaching net zero, and also, thanks for that beautiful story. Now, let's going back to what you've mentioned about chasing the money, because I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about your story and everything that happened with chasing the money and why it got you to that realization that actually I could have done it differently, as this is something that is quite topical at the moment.
Yeah. So for reference in storytelling, this is an origin story, right?
Nice.
So it's just to circle back there, just so you know. I'm still waiting for the day that someone says, you were talking about storytelling not being about you, but then you just talked about you for 20 minutes. No, like, it's a different kind of
well,
story.
I'll say
Yeah.
this
I wasn't selling anything. Right?
Exactly.
I'm not selling anything. I don't need to do that. Yeah. So I've had quite a varied career, and I think it's done me really well over the years. I mentioned earlier that I entered the design field, the branding field, with no experience or qualifications, and that's true. I left school at a very early age, got GCSEs and left, and just went and got a job like everyone else, which was really unfortunate because I wanted to do something creative at school, I wanted to do something design related, and the school that I went to, just there was no support or encouragement. So I just went and got a job like everyone else, and slowly but surely over the years, I landed in private medical insurance, which actually I really enjoyed. It was a great industry. I enjoyed the job. I did a lot of B2B medical insurance, so it was a lot of company, larger policies, and eventually me and a old colleague went into business together and exited from medical insurance to life insurance, and then both realised that everyone was trying to cover their mortgage, and we thought, well, maybe that's the next step. So having worked in insurance for many years, we expanded into mortgages. We did a 2-year mortgage qualification course in like 2 weeks. It was one of these intensive things. And the second I started doing mortgages, I realized that the whole system was broken. I had been in insurance, which you can do an online application for. The process is about an hour at the most. You can do a lot of the medical questionnaires digitally now. A lot of it can be done over the phone rather than face to face, and still could have been 10 years ago. So insurance was much less risk in that sense. They're not lending money; they're just securing a policy over someone. Whereas mortgages was very different. I started to realise as I started working in mortgages that I would have to work something like 10 to 15 hours per client before I knew whether I was going to get paid or not. And if they failed the mortgage application because of the way regulation is, you would have to start that process all over again from the beginning, because you would have to confirm if there's been any change in circumstance, if their income's changed. So it'd almost be like starting the whole process again, 10 to 15 hours. And I didn't know if I was going to get paid at that. That to me was insane, when I could spend an hour on the phone with a company and sign up a policy and get paid and everyone's happy. So from every perspective I could think of, income, time, productivity, you name it, the system was broken. So I started to dig into how lenders make decisions on mortgages and started to really understand that process. I understood it fully in medical insurance and critical illness and life insurance, but not much in mortgages. So I had to learn. But I figured it out. And eventually what happened was I thought, I think I could solve this problem. Why aren't people using software, off-the-shelf software, so you don't need to build anything? Why aren't people using these different pieces of software to allow someone to complete this process in about an hour online rather than 10 or 15? And no one was doing it. So I went and got, I think, 5 or 6 off-the-shelf softwares and built a proof of concept. And I branded it as what was called Morgie Digital Mortgages. And I was the first mortgage advisor to digitize that process. And I got some interest from different companies about how to do it and what it was and if they could invest in it and all kinds of stuff. And eventually there was a company in London that said, look, there's an opportunity for us to get some funding to basically process all of the mortgages within the M25 that are affordable housing mortgages, so first-time buyers and things. And the problem is we currently do 100 applications a month, and if we did get this funding, we would be processing 500 a day. And
wow, the jump.
we not only they basically said we not only cannot process that many, we can't hire quick enough to be able to process that many. So we're going to have to find another way, and we think that with a few tweaks, we could use what you've built to do that. And so I said, sure. What do you want to do? And they said, we basically want you to build it for us. And so I spent 15 months building the software for them. I probably need to mention that when I entered the design world, it's the third time I'm going to say this, but it's relevant. When I entered the design world and the branding world, I had no experience, no commercial experience, no qualifications, and I learned from people in practice. When someone said, can you build a software for us? I had never built software in my life. I had never managed a software development team. I had no idea what coding was beyond basic HTML and CSS that I had dabbled with like 10 years before. This was new for me. So what compelled me to say, sure, I'll do that? I don't know, but it seems to be that throughout my life there has been a pattern of saying yes and just figuring it out. So I said yes, and I spent 15 months building it, and they won the funding. We won the funding
Wow.
with the system. It was £3.5 billion over 5 years, and they literally owned 100% of London affordable housing mortgages. It was quite the feat.
That's brilliant, especially going from never doing any kind of software development project to a large one straight away, and
I mean,
during a
just for
short period of
context,
time.
yeah, during just for context, I had a friend who was like a full stack developer,
Of course.
and I called him and said, "Mate, I've got this job and I don't know what I'm doing. You're going to have to help me." And he said, "Sure, I can help you." And he taught me things like agile project management, and he sat in a room with me for days, just basically teaching me what he knew, because that was the only way we were going to do it. He was like, "I've got some people that I could give some front end stuff to, and I've got a designer friend that could do UI and stuff." we literally, we just did it because it needed to be done, and it was a great opportunity, and it was a big problem that needed solving. And
But I guess
the thing that I bought.
Yeah. Go on, sorry.
The thing that I brought to the table is I knew how lenders made decisions. That's what I brought to the table, and all we needed to do was convert what I had already mapped out, which was like a logic string set of how they make decisions. We just needed to convert that to a system, basically. And that's what we did.
So did you not feel at some point imposter syndrome, especially when the deal went through and you're thinking, great, now I've got to deliver this. I've got 15 months. Yes, I've got my friends. I've got the team that's slowly being building up now. I still have to deliver this.
I think I would be lying if I said there wasn't some imposter syndrome along the way. I think my problem was that there was so much on the line for getting this thing built and out there, is that I just didn't have time to think whether there was an imposter or not. I just got on with it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, well, definitely love the mindset there, just jumping in and just getting it done. And I guess there's a lot of founders that are in these shoes, when you really are passionate about what you need to build. And another thing I've picked up from your story is not just about you, it's also about the people that you surround yourself with that can help you. So you're the one there with the vision, with the drive, and getting people to the finish line, but you don't actually have to do everything yourself, or you just won't achieve anything, or you go insane.
Yeah, do you know that's one of the biggest things I think everyone can learn just from watching or listening to this, which is you surround yourself with the right people and you'll be fine. There's I've been running a mastermind for the last 2 years, and it's amazing to see the effect that even just one person has on another in their journey, whether it's emotional support, technical support, marketing support, whatever it is. Just being in the right room, the right people, makes so much difference. You don't have to do everything alone. Now, I know earlier I was saying do more on your own and bootstrap, but that doesn't mean doing it on your own. You can give it to other people, but yeah, just understanding that you don't have to do everything, and just get some people around you that can help is an amazing thing.
Yeah, and talking about not doing everything on your own, the one thing that I would suggest that you don't intend to do on your own, especially if you don't have any background, is to start putting your brands together. If you after listening to this episode and remember what some of the earlier discussions with Danny, branding is not something that you do, that you pack up. It's something that needs to be done and to continue to grow and progress with you as your company. And Danny, I believe you have something special that you are working on at the moment that could be of interest to our founders as well.
Yeah, so I've been working with businesses, startups, and small and large businesses for a number of years. And the one thing that is different about working with other businesses as it is with working with startup founders is that startup founders are in a very different position. They have different goals, different ways of doing things, and I wanted to create something that was aligned to the founder journey or the product building journey. So rather than it being a exercise, like a set and forget exercise, actually getting you off to a good start and increasing your chances of traction and funding through, starting the branding journey early. I wanted to put something together. So I run something that's called a brand sprint, which is basically a very cost-effective way of you getting good branding early, whether that's messaging, identity design, logo design. So I run something called brand sprints. It ends over the course of a week, or it actually happens over the course of 3 days, but spread over a week. So the way that it usually works is that Monday we'll have a strategy call with you and or your team. I will go away and do some research and validation and produce concepts. And then on the Thursday, you will have a progress review call where you see the brand or see some concepts, some design decisions, and then I make the tweaks. And then on the Friday, it's presented to you again. And essentially, it's a way of you getting started in a short space of time in the same way that you would build your product. So runs alongside your product sprints, integrates into your workflow easily, and is really cost effective to do. So if anyone's at the point where they're unsure, I guess, of whether they're going to get traction or funding or how they do that and how they increase their chances, this is ideal for them.
And I can't emphasize that even more. I think it's really important, especially with everything that we've heard, to grow your startup. You need traction. To need traction, you kind of need to have a brand out there. Let people know that not only that you exist, but really connect with their hearts and not just their mind. And please do remember the logo thing just blew my mind. If you didn't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to the tips that Danny shared, especially on how you can just captivate people's attention and stop losing people scrolling away from you. And there are so mistakes that Danny mentioned that you will definitely resonate with them as strongly as resonate with them as well. So thanks, Danny, for being such an amazing guest on this podcast. I can't wait to continue the journey with you and the team at Founder Institute London, as we are both directors and we always have fun, either it's the pre-session or the live sessions. But in the meantime, for anyone out there who want to find out more about Danny, short story venture, and this amazing offer that you've put together for startups, how do they connect with you?
The best place to find me is probably on LinkedIn. So you can go find me on LinkedIn, Danny Matthews, or the actual Danny if it's in the URL bar. And or go visit Short Story Ventures. Or drop me an email, hello@shortstoryventures.com.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thanks again for the audience for listening to our podcast. We'll be back again for another edition next week. In the meantime, remember that we are also here for any of your technical or product developments headache. Most importantly, dream, build, play. Let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.